Welcome, friends and followers, to the Transforming the HX show. Today I am here with Hugh Ballou, and Hugh and I have had a wonderful friendship for probably 13 years now, something like that. It's gone back to 2007, I believe. I was still working my corporate gig at the time. That's how I kind of document the dates.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to have you here today. We've got a lot to talk about, and just to give people a little quick introduction, Hugh is an amazing individual, has followed a path that I'll have him talk a little bit more in detail about, but really spent 40 years as an orchestra conductor, and from that learned how to lead, how to really keep people, if you will, on the same page of music in this case. And with that was able to develop some leadership principles that he now teaches worldwide. And in the last several years, he's worked very closely with leadership from nonprofit organizations. I believe you've got about 250,000, if I heard correctly, followers in that.
I do.
Excellent. So Hugh has done some amazing work. I met him actually because he's also a faculty member at CEO Space, and that's where we first met and got to kind of build some good relationship, worked on a few projects together. And it was a wonderful time. I kind of lost touch for a few years, but we've been back in touch for the last few years now and keeping up with everything that we're doing together. So I like that. But we're going to talk tonight in depth about leadership. And that's really something I think is very important where we are today. And so without me jumping too far ahead, Hugh, why don't you give people a little more background about who you are, where you're from? I put up the little promo video earlier showing your books and your podcast, but let's hear it from you.
Well, I started conducting when I was 18. And all of my career, I've done things I was totally unqualified for. I'd never been in a choir. So I started directing a church choir because I saw somebody do it. Now, I had been studying piano and music theory since I was 7. So I knew about music. And then I was actually enrolled in Georgia State College at the time in the music school. And I started as a piano major, graduated as a musical literature major, and was going to be a musicologist. But fortunately, I was saved. I got drafted in the Army, had time to think about it. So did some amazing stuff in the Army. I got hazardous duty in Colorado Springs, but did some major productions with the theater there that were the first production of Jesus Christ Superstar in the world. And that was before Broadway. And then came back, decided I didn't want to go back to Atlanta where I grew up, went to Florida, served churches there, basically went from 120 member to 12,000. And so in my career, I would do major choral works. I had a large facility, and I could hold 200 singers and a full orchestra in the chancel. So I hired the Florida Orchestra, hired the Huntsville Symphony, Atlanta Symphony, would do some major things. And so in that career, I was middle management, the music conductor, the minister of music, the director of worship and fine arts. And so I wasn't the pastor, wasn't the ultimate person in charge. So leadership is a position of influence. So I influenced people all around me. And in a mega church of 12,000 members, you have hundreds of events a week. I had 750 people in the music program and the who's who of celebrities in my committees. You learn how to get things done. So fundamentally, I defined in my first book, Moving Spirits, Building Lives. It's about transformational leadership. It's building strong communities, and a conductor knows how to build strong communities. So I had to have the chops for the orchestra and have the choir prepared and then be able to produce. So in that book, I defined that 10% of my job was music, 90% enable that to happen. So that's the Ballou 10-90 rule. 10% of our job as a nonprofit leader, as an inventor, as an entrepreneur, 10% is what we really know. 90% is what we don't know, and we need to build that team around us. So I was a merchant, bought a little camera store in Madeira Beach. It was doing $12,000 a year, took it to $1.5 million in 10 years. Built programs. The last 3 churches I served were in trouble when I got there. And then I'm on my third career as a leadership strategist and an organizational developer. And by the way, I wasn't formerly a orchestra conductor. I am an orchestra conductor because I live in Lynchburg, Virginia. And one of the groups I worked with was the Lynchburg Symphony Orchestra. And one day they said, "Oh, you're conducting the Christmas concert." And so I had the great joy of directing twice in the first 2 years I lived here. and just led that orchestra from the board position as well as from the podium. So I will tell you, the leadership principles work in a musical ensemble, and they work in a culture of high-performing leaders. So it's transferable from the podium, which is the thing you stand on, by the way, to the boardroom, whether it's a corporate boardroom, a nonprofit boardroom, or a church board. So that's sort of the overview. I'm in my third career, and it's where I'm having the most fun, and I think where I'm having the most impact.
Well, if I add up all the years you've put into each of these careers, they either have to be overlapping or you've been around for a long time. So I'll leave that go for now. We'll see.
Make them wonder. Make them wonder.
So Hugh, I mean, it's the thing I've been always impressed by, and I think that's the first time I heard transformational leadership. That term was actually taking one of your classes at CEO Space. And so let's talk a little bit about what transformational leadership really means before we get too deep, because I know that term's going to come up as we talk today. So let's get a little deeper in what that means to you.
You took my class. Did you take notes?
I did, but that was like 13 years ago.
Oh, so I can't even ask you questions, see what you learn. Well, it's a style of leadership. It's just the opposite from autocratic, charismatic leadership, where you're the boss. Double SOB backwards. You're the boss. You say what happens. Everything you have to say. You're the bottleneck. So it's autocratic. It's about you. Transformational leadership is the opposite. It's on the side of servant leadership. The servant leader is in the background. The transformational leader is in the foreground as a cheerleader, but it's not about you. It's about the vision. So think of a drama ensemble. Think of a music orchestra, choir. Think of a sports team. As we're recording this, there's a NASCAR race going on, and those guys jump over the fence, and 7 guys fill up a tank and put on 4 tires in like 13 seconds. So the fine-tuned ensemble makes it work. And in music, you don't give up your individual skills. Actually, in the boardroom either, actually on the staff, you don't give up your individual skills. It's the synergy of the common vision, hence the name of my company, Center Vision. It's the synergy of the common vision that we can do things together that multiplies what we do individually. So transformational leadership is a culture of high-performing leaders, and it's up to the leader to develop and articulate the vision. It's not a committee. You have the vision. You articulate it, and you empower the team by teaching them, by leading them, by mentoring them, by letting them have the information they need. And then first and foremost, you model what you want to see. The old saying for the orchestra is, what you get is what they see. And so we lead by influence. And a good example of transformational leadership is that people think the conductor is a dictator. And I got to tell you, you got union musicians and you got this little white stick. You can't make anybody do anything. They're going to play for 2 hours and they're going to leave because that's what you've paid for, unless, of course, you're paying overtime. So we have to have our act together. We have to know what we're going to accomplish. And they're going to play the notes, but we can influence them. We don't tell them how to play. We influence them to play at a higher level. So the competency of the leader is contagious. And we do set the example by our conduct, by our demeanor, our enthusiasm, and all of those aspects of who we are.
I love that description because it really brings to light the proper role of a leader. And it helps reset kind of the structure that we see in most organizations, where is that autocratic, hierarchical approach to things, where this is what I'm going to do. Or on the other side, as you said, the committee side, which I'm sure in the nonprofits, you probably see the committee side come up quite frequently, I would guess. So as you're looking back at your career as a conductor and with all the work you've done in the musical space, what of that really comes across in the leadership coaching and training that you do today? Like, what are some of the key elements that come to mind?
We set the example, and we're the leader. We're not the doer. And there's a large body of research coming out of Georgetown University, started by the psychiatrist Murray Bowen. And he developed 8 leadership concepts. And it's the antithesis of Freud. How does that make you feel when you go to a Freud therapist? When you are coached by a a Bowen professional. It's let's stay in our thinking mind. So we get out of sorts as a leader. We get anxious, we get emotional, and then we expect to do more things because we don't feel adequate. So we have to prove that we can do it. So nonprofit leader burnout is at a crisis level, 45%, and 75%. This is a Meyer Foundation study years ago. 75% are looking at the door to get out, but 45 burnout leave, and 1 out of 10 clergy make it to retirement. And we do it to ourselves. And it's called over functioning. And, I tell pastors, you're doing all this stuff. Well, I don't want to bother church members with it because I can do it. So you're robbing a member of an opportunity to exercise their passion and work on the program. So it puts it in a whole different framework. And we want to do things. No, we're the resource. We're the leader resource. We equip leaders. And so it's a dynamic that people don't understand. So the biggest thing I see is leaders overfunction, they do too much, and they get frantic and burned out. And that's preventable.
So with that in mind, what do you see happening right now? I mean, we're going through COVID and we've had the quarantines, and obviously churches have been locked down or very limited in their capacity. We've had other nonprofits that have way too much demand, but they can't even bring volunteers in to help out. I'm guessing their financial resources are limited at this point in time to some extent as well with what's happening. So what are you seeing out there right now in the nonprofit world for these leaders?
I'm seeing some very creative things. I'm seeing a whole lot of virtual meetings. So I just left the presidency of the Lynchburg Symphony, and we started thinking this through, and they're carrying on the plans of how do we take music to the people. And we just opened up, I had the pleasure of opening the first week in a renovated historic concert hall downtown. And they're very cautious. They're going to open up again in October with limited seating, 200 seats out of 800. But we're going to add the element of streaming to it. We are still part of it. So how do we leverage what we've got? So we have a core of people who can be there present in person. We don't have an intermission. And then people that can stream and maybe even work out a deal with the restaurants that people can have dinner and a concert and have the whole family around the TV. So there's creative things going on. I see a whole lot of churches doing Bible studies and mission projects and evening prayer services and daily devotions where people can just open their device and they can participate. And, we probably didn't need to have as many meetings as we were having. And it's sort of a time of clarifying and resetting the bar. And I don't know of any organization that doesn't need a makeover and doesn't need a reality check and doesn't need an upgrade in their effectiveness and their efficiency. Now, membership organizations are really, really troubled because organizations aren't paying for the education piece right now because they're worried about cash flow and worried about ultimate sustainability. But, there's still money in the world, and some of the companies have done really well during this time of shut-in. And so the companies that have done well are doing really well. So I think it's a time of resetting the bar, and it's a time that leaders can earn their keep. The story 3 Feet from Gold, Greg Reed did the book and the movie, where the guy had the gold mine and he sold it because he never found gold. And the person that bought the gold mine dug 3 feet and hit the mother lode and was immensely wealthy. So many people give up just before they're going to succeed. That was one of the famous Thomas Edison quotes. And so stick with it. Stick with it long enough. We try something, we don't stick with it. Then we overcompensate and we work ourselves too hard. Then we get burned out and anxious. And then we create, that's very contagious. We create this culture of people that are burned out and anxious. And it's not a good end. So it's a cleansing period and it's a growing period. The people that are going to do well are the people that are now working on their own skills, working on their own plans, and building their own culture of high-performing leaders. And when we're in a time like this, in the last recession, 2008 or whatever, many organizations cut back on their marketing and advertising budgets, when in fact that was the time to increase those budgets, because everybody else is cutting back on the budgets. And so I talked about NASCAR a minute ago, or Formula One racing. When you see a wreck, the tendency for everybody is to put on the brakes and slow down. If you got a pathway, what you do is you push on the accelerator and you get ahead of people because you know other people are pulling back. So look around, observe, and then find out where your niche is. And there's still money. We just need to figure out how to attract money to support our work.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, a really key point is that the money is still out there. It's just, it may not be circulating and moving as fast as it was before. And so we've got to be aware of that. But I think the other side to this is it's a time of clarifying and also a time of accelerating. And I like that because I think if you can shed those extra meetings that you don't need to have, the extra activities that were unnecessary and weren't providing value, it allows you to really focus on that mission again, come back to center stream and say, what is it we do? And then move ahead. This is a time of catapulting, I think, for a number of people, the number of businesses I've watched out there that they may not be in the growth mode yet, but they are preparing themselves for some pretty tremendous growth as things begin to shift. I think they'll be on that front line of the shift when it happens. So let's turn the tables a little bit here. You coach top leaders, you coach with startup leaders. How do you actually empower them to achieve their dream? How do you help them think through what it is they really want to accomplish? Because a lot of times I've been in this space for a while and a lot of startup people think they know what they want. And once you start digging in, it's like, it's not clear enough yet. So how do you get that clarity and then how do you move them on from there?
Well, first of all, we slow people down. And I would like to say I do coach people that are starting a business or a nonprofit. I do coach leaders in mid-cap corporations and, 5 to 100 million. You know what? There's not a whole lot of difference. There's still a real gap in understanding the planning part. Now, when a conductor steps on the podium, we got that thing in front of us called the musical score. Everything that happens is in that score. I know what the oboes are playing. I know what the violins are playing. I know what the percussion's playing. I know what the trumpet's playing. It's all here. It's in a big old page and it goes by really fast. And so we have to know what we're doing and we have to have the plan. How many people start without a plan? 95%. How many people think about what they're going to do and then weigh it? No, that's about the same. How many people fail? About the same. So, the enormous number of failures is astounding, and it's so preventable. So I lead leaders through an exercise of building their roadmap. I call it a solution map. Where do you want to be? Now let's figure out how we're going to get there. And I get people giving me all kind of excuses why they can't do that. Oh, I don't have time for that. So wait a minute. You got time to do it wrong and have to do it over numerous times. You got time to waste a whole lot of money and upset a whole lot of people because you really didn't know what you were doing and you did hunt and peck and trial and error. And then you got to go back and do it over. Now, wouldn't that take more time and money and you lose faith with people than if you just sat down and did the planning and then work the plan? And the other thing people say is, oh, I don't want to have to build a plan because that limits my creativity. So I say, okay, you get up every day and you got to spend a lot of energy figuring out what you're going to do and what you're going to do first and what you're going to do next. What if you already had it and you got up in the morning, here's my plan. So you take all of your creativity and you implement your plan. You're not stuck in a rut. You've got the container for your creative energy. So you are spending your energy doing the work that you love, not doing the things that you hate. So we do it to ourselves and we like walk off a cliff because we haven't figured out where the road ends.
So what would you say then for, let's say you've got brilliant people that want to start something today. And I mean, because there is a lot of opportunity today. There are a lot of ideas that are coming forth. People are seeing new ways to do things that we've never done before. What kind of advice would you give them right now? Because we also know that this wave isn't going to be here. So they do have to act reasonably fast. So how do you balance that slowing down and also acting urgently at the same time in the time like today?
It's like the tortoise and the hare fable. If you slow down and do it methodically, you'll actually get there faster and with a whole lot less trauma. If anybody would give me 8 hours, I've taken all this planning and I've perfected an 8-hour process. If we could sit down for 8 hours in person virtually and I could let you do a data dump and we could put it into a structure, you would walk out of there with a 1, 2, 3, 4 how-to plan. This is proprietary that I've worked out. And people take days, weeks, months to do a strategy. I just said, we got to go to work. So let's do the framework, and then we'll build the implementation plan, and we'll build the next steps as we're doing it. So over the course of 90 days, you can take an idea, put it in a structure, and then build a team and build the revenue and build a process. I call it 4 weeks to revenue. Build a process for success. If you have a 1, 2, 3, 4, and somebody that's actually been there can help you with that. If you look at the most successful people in any industry, coaches, opera singers, athletes, public speakers, you look at people in any field, they have at least one, if not multiple coaches to keep them at the top of their game. Actors, it's the people that are trying to get there that are going to figure it out for themselves, and they're broke, that say, no, I don't need a coach. We all need a coach. I've got two, and I've got a leadership coach, and I teach leadership. So I need to make sure that I'm at the top of my game all the time. So those are the main things that I would say.
That makes a lot of sense. I think in today's world, the people they're looking for the opportunity, and at the same time, I don't know that a lot of them are looking for the coach, for the person to help them guide them through it. I mean, I can tell you, 2008, 2009, I was in a much different place. I've approached this with, I would say, both caution for the situation we're in, obviously the making sure that things continue to sustain in my business and in my life and that. But at the same time, I'm also extremely enthusiastic because I know so many people have backed away. And that's exactly why I do these Facebook Lives, because I know so many people have backed away. They're not connecting. And now is the time to be connecting with people. Now is the time to take a leadership role out there. And so what type of advice would you give to a company that's trying to figure out right now, what do we do? Where do we go? We're not sure if we're going to be sustainable. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. Not sure if they can open their doors, maybe as an example, restaurants and hotels and retail stores. What do they do?
You don't have the answer yourself. We call them blind spots. How do we, when I work on the strategy for my organizations, I can't do it myself. I have to get somebody external to help me spit out what I know and then challenge me on the things I think I know and the assumptions that I have about what's going to happen. I tend to be a little on the optimistic side rather than the realistic side. And so you don't figure it out by yourself, because we know a lot about our expert. We're subject matter experts. We're skilled in what we do. But it's like that 10-90 rule. 10% is what we know. 90% is the rest. And it's time for us. Remember, we used to get to the airport, just barely park, get in the door, run down the hall, and get on a plane. Well, we can't do that anymore. 9/11 changed all of that. Now, this virus changed it as well. And so we're not going back to a normal. We're not going to a new normal. We're going to a new radical. And it's the people that do things radically different that are going to survive. And there'll be restaurants, there'll be churches, there'll be synagogues, there'll be hotels that will not survive. Just think of the Fortune 500 list. When it started, there's probably only 40 or 50 companies that are still on the list. They were the best companies in existence. They failed to stay current with what people needed, and they failed to keep up with the market, and they failed to reevaluate and update what they were doing. So the smaller you are, the more flexible you are. You're still doing what you do. You might have to do it in a different way. So we need to build, like Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich, to find the mastermind group. A lot of great stories in that book. The mastermind is the collection of other minds. And if you want to get a group together, they can help you figure out stuff. You help them, they help you. So it's the synergy of a peer-to-peer group. And by the way, get in a group of people that you perceive to be better than you are, because you end up being the sum total of the people you hang around the most. That was Napoleon Hill's star student, Clement Stone, that said that. So it's who we hang around, it's how we build our position of influence, and it's how we build our strategy that's not like everybody else. We tend to want to do, that works there. I can do that too. No, you're called to do something different. So figure out what that is and find a niche in the market and fill that need, because we make money because we provide value and we solve problems.
Absolutely. I know we have some people watching this who are, they probably call themselves solopreneurs. They may be individual consultants or coaches. They run a small business, and for them, they might be thinking, leadership. I am the leader. What would you say to them? How would you need to address the leadership elements with them?
When I went to Nashville to interview Cal Turner, told me the story of when he went to his top management team at Dollar General. And he said, my dad founded this company and I've got the job of president and CEO because of my genes. And I'm going to be your leader. You've got the skills, but I've got the vision. And so he surrounded himself with those most capable people. And he said, Hugh, leadership is about defining your gaps and finding really good people to fill those gaps. We can't possibly do everything in today's world. We need to build a skill team and learn how to manage it. And we do things out of order. So you and I've met lots of people that are going to start a business, and they talk to me about leadership and they say, oh, I read the book. I got that down. Oh, really? I bet you found the end of the internet as well. And, oh, I don't need a team. I'll do that later after I get a team. Wrong. You're going to get the wrong team. And if you haven't built a strategy, you don't know what competencies you need. You don't know what the culture fit's going to need. And you don't know what the program of work is going to be. So we do things out of order. So leadership is a lot of different things. I do have a free podcast. Can I mention that?
Absolutely.
And people don't realize the different facets of what we call leadership. And leaders are three things to me. Leaders get things done. Leaders know how things get done, or they figure it out. And leaders are influencers. A lot of people would qualify for leaders in any organization. So there's room for lots of leaders. There's the one champion, the one top leader, the one visionary that pulls it together. So yes, you're an entrepreneur. Yes, you're a solopreneur. You are a leader, but you do have a team. You have formal teams and informal teams. So if you're talking to anybody, you hire anybody, even part-time or contract labor, you got a team. And if you don't have a team, you need a team. You need advisors. You need a mastermind. And so it really takes leadership skills to be able to influence and to be able to understand how we influence. Because you know what, Tony, we as leaders probably cause as many problems as we solve, but we're totally unaware of it. And we don't get the respect of the people we lead because we're trying to fake it instead of saying, okay, I got this skill, but I don't know that. That's why I've got you. There's a thing in the military where if your platoon doesn't respect you, they're likely to shoot you in the back in combat. And there's a lot of corporate leaders that get shot in the back every day and they don't even know it. So the biggest deficit is understanding what leadership is. And my podcast is called 31 Days to Becoming a Better Leader. You can get it anywhere you get podcasts, but you can go to betterleader.me. Isn't that easy? Betterleader.me. And you can find the podcast there, and you can click on a link and download it.
What was the name of the podcast again? 31 Days to
Becoming a Better Leader. And it's at betterleader.me is where you find the page on the site where I have it. So you can listen to it for free. There's a for purchase action guide. It's got a whole course in it for $30. And so there's just lots of resources that I have that you can learn from. But like Jim Rohn used to say, work harder on yourself than you work on your business. Harder on yourself than you do your nonprofit. Work harder on yourself than you do the orchestra. If you are tip-top shape, you're going to be able to do the job, and nothing happens without leadership.
So 2 questions come out of that. And so I'll try to remember them both. I'll ask one at a time because I know I get excited when I have questions like this. A lot of nonprofits that I've worked with, they do phenomenal work, but kind of like entrepreneurs who are technicians, we're subject matter experts typically. I see that the nonprofits get caught up in the passion of what they're doing. The leader has a great vision, and then everyone's chasing that vision, but they never pause to really get a good strategy in place. So with your expertise and when you work with nonprofits and that, what do you have to do, or how would you approach that leader who just wants everyone to be running after their passion and doesn't have that strategy yet in place?
The strategy is a pattern for engagement. How are people going to work if they don't know what they're doing? How are the players in the orchestra going to play if they don't have a piece of sheet music? And the number one rule of thumb is you don't write a strategy and give it to the board. The planners are in fact the doers. So when I use storyboards, when they write something and put it on the board and it's their idea, they're in, they own it. They've got passion for it. And so when I work with boards, they go from passive to active, from apathetic to passionate, because they've got skin in the game. And people don't say, yes, I'm going to be on a board to come up and be bored. It's your meetings. That's the number one team killer. We do bad meetings and we don't have a plan, and we expect people to know what's going on in our brain. That's the autocratic leader. Do what I tell you, do this, do this, do this. That doesn't work in today's world. And the work we do is too important to leave it to chance. And so to have somebody that's an external planner come in and lead the board through a planning process. Now, you own the vision if you're the leader. It was established for you or by you if you're a founder and a leader. Then you articulate that vision and mission. You run it down. Everybody looks at it, maybe makes some suggested tweaks in the language. And then we say, okay, what does it look like 5 years from now? What does it look like 1 year from now? What does it look like 1 month from now? Then we start bringing it down to today. How are we going to move from where we are to where we want to be? Now, strategic plan is not a business plan. Business plan is a financial document you give a funder or a grantor or banker. A strategic plan is an operational, organic document that you continue to update and revise on a regular basis. So if it's a long-term plan, you always have a long-term plan. And so, did that answer your question?
Absolutely. And it leads to the second question, which I'm glad I held off on. So let's say no one had COVID-19 in their plan, whether it was nonprofits or commercials, no one had it in their plan. So when you have something like this come up, and maybe it's not a crisis like this, but you have something unexpected, unforeseeable come up, how do you adjust to that? That would be the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, because I think this is really important for people that are listening here today, now that we know that something like this can happen, how do we build our organization to be resilient so we don't get caught again with whatever the next thing is?
Mm-hmm. We don't want to ever be locked in and not be able to be flexible. And so the worst thing is to not have a pattern for evaluating and resetting the bar. Like we have a lot of bad practices like the annual evaluation. You're going to wait a year before you're telling somebody how they're doing? We need to have milestones and benchmarks that are continuously evaluatable. We need to have interactions with the leader and your top leaders. The Pareto principle works there. You get the most productivity out of 20% of your people. So you work with those individually. The other 80%, you work with them in groups. But you need to be in touch with everybody in the organization at some point, either in a group or individual. And so it's important to leverage your time because you're multitasking through other people. And in that, you build the knowledge base. People have specific skills. They're able to make adjustments because they know what's going on. They know how it works. If you're in Disney World and you want to know something, ask the person sweeping the streets. They know everything that can take you places, and they're going to stop sweeping, and they'll take you there. And so there's the element of being able to be flexible. And if we have this pattern of you plan, you evaluate, you revise, you update. We think we can write a plan and then we use it for 5 years and we throw it away and do a new plan. No, it's organic. We migrate it over time. And I got to tell you, COVID was a big setback. The 2008 economic setback was a big setback, but there were many billionaires that grew out of that last recession. There are many people that said, I'm charging forward. I can see where I can bring value to humankind. I'm going to do something unique. And it worked for them. And so it's the no fail attitude of the leader. What could you accomplish if you positively had the faith you could do it? And I've had some amazing opportunities in my life, which I never deserved and I never was qualified for, but I just walked into it, did my preparation, had my coach, and did my planning, and actually knew that I was going to succeed. When you're out on a stage and you got that little stick and you got a bunch of people watching you, and you got a bunch of performers watching you, every move you make gets a reaction, and it's really easy for things to fall apart. So you really have to have the confidence of being able to pull it together. And then when it starts going rocky, you've got to take charge and pull it back together. So when we come upon uncertain times, we push into that. We make sure that we know what's going on, and we make sure we stay close to people, and we evaluate what we're doing, and we let go of what's not working. Doesn't mean you give up on your plan. It means you fine tune it and revise it. We do have setbacks. They're not as big as this one. But if you're in business, you're running a charity, you're running a church, you're going to have some bad times. And so it's time for the people to get going that are really leaders when times are tough.
Continuing on that line there, I think there's one of the things that I see happening is if we go back to 2007, 2008, 2009, that financial crisis there, we had the millennials were about halfway into the workforce at that point. About 8 of the 16 years were covered at that point. And the rest of them were coming into the workforce after that. So they saw what was happening. And at that point, also, we had the technology, the iPhones and things like that coming into play. So business took a major shift during that crisis and after that crisis. And consumer spending, as well as, with the nonprofits, they took a shift as well. And so we shifted toward this experience-based economy where we wanted to buy experiences and make memories and things like that. And so that shifted what we were buying for the next 10, 15 years, 10 or 12 years, I guess. Now with where we're facing, I perceive something different is unfolding. And I want to get your take on this. What I see potentially happening here is people are beginning to evaluate and say, well, you know what? I want something more meaningful in my life. The experiences were good, but I'm watching businesses fall apart. I'm watching people I know, getting sick and potentially even dying. So I'm reevaluating my life right now. I think we're going to come out of this with people focused more on significance as opposed to success, as opposed to the experiences. They're going to want to be giving more. They're going to care more about sustainability and those types of things, and whatever definition that not just environmental, but other ways. What is your take on that? What are you perceiving right now that's going to change as we come through this crisis?
Well, authenticity is an anchor of transformational leadership. And if you pretend to be something you're not, you can't be effective. And so there is a very significant shift to relevance and authenticity and significance, as you put it. And I don't think people can articulate it yet. But, there's a lot of fluff before. And we're figuring out how to do things in a more lean and effective and efficient manner. And I think many organizations can come out of here, having shed the fat, wish I could shed some more, shed the fat and be actually better. And if we give up emotionally, it ain't going to happen. We carry the torch. We're the believer. And Napoleon Hill in his work said, whatever the mind can conceive and believe can be achieved. It's about this positive mental attitude. Now, we can fool ourselves by lying to ourselves and being all rosy, but we can also kill initiatives if we're a downer. And so Napoleon Hill also determined was that the mind can't hold a positive and a negative image at the same time. So he interviewed 500 top leaders, and they all had a definite purpose. They could articulate that. That was what they held in their mind. Thomas Edison, took him 10,000 times. How many people would do that? 10,000 tries to finally invent the light bulb. But he put it this way. He said, I found 9,999 things that didn't work. And so he knew he could do it. So we go, as Wayne Dyer used to say, we go from believing we can succeed to knowing we can succeed. We will succeed because we've done the planning. And you don't wait till the planning is finished. That's perfection paralysis. We build the first plan, and we start walking, and then we fill in the blanks as we get more clarity on it. So no, we don't sit down and spend months planning. We put the plan together and we go to work.
I love that. And I'm going to play on your Edison comment there a little bit, because when I was growing up, I loved Edison. I just loved, the stories. He's always the hero, if you will. And what I didn't realize was what short a period of time it was that he actually created the light bulb. It was only a matter of like about 2 years, if I remember correctly. It was a very short period of time. And I had the opportunity to, when I was at the Smithsonian, every time I'm there, I go and actually go through the Edison exhibit because I see something new every single time. But what I noticed probably 3 or 4 years ago when I was there visiting, if you walk in, if they haven't changed the setup, you walk in and you turn to the left, and it's kind of telling the story of his life. There's some of his handwritten journals on the wall right there displayed. One of the pages, it's hard to read, but I took a picture of it and I've kind of deciphered it. It says something to the effect of how I will create a system of illumination. He knew it wasn't a level light bulb because he had to get the generators and the wires and everything else. There was no system of illumination or electricity. So I will create a system of illumination that can replace the oil lamp illumination. Something to that effect is what he says. And then he has his calculations on there. He actually intended to make it 1/3 the price of oil and was calculating how that would happen, because he knew for it to be viable, it wasn't just about inventing something. It was about making a viable system that he could then take to the market and make money with. And I think your strategic planning, if that document right there should be in everyone's, the first page of every strategic planning guide, because that was his vision.
Absolutely. And, Van Gogh was a brilliant painter. He did everything in 3 years. It's the brilliance of how do we take what's in our brain and make it happen. And so we need that plan. When Napoleon Hill interviewed Andrew Carnegie, who was son of poor Scottish immigrants, very undereducated, became the wealthiest man in the world because he applied some really strong principles. And so he's the one that started this whole thing with Napoleon Hill, and Hill made an offer. Carnegie made an offer, and Napoleon Hill responded in a very short period of time, under a minute and a half. And so he got the 10-year job of working for free. But Carnegie said to him, any idea that's held in the mind and emphasized, that's either feared or revered, will begin at once to manifest itself into the most appropriate physical form available, appropriate and convenient physical form available. I will add to that a written goal. It's a dream if you don't write it down. And so it's the discipline of saying, this is what we're going to do. Leaders live in the future. We project it and we pull toward it. And so if we can articulate it clearly and we can share it, the energy that comes, Tony, I've achieved some goals in my career in church music and otherwise that never had a reason to happen, logical reason, because I shared it and was vulnerable. Being vulnerable is a good asset for a leader. Being vulnerable and sharing it, now people knew how they could play into the space. And being enthusiastic about it, we convinced people, this is what's going to happen. Do you want to play with us? And remarkable things happen.
Absolutely. Sorry, I had my mute button on there, so I didn't interrupt you. So it's interesting because we've talked about strategic planning. We've talked about the shift of things, and you've mentioned Napoleon Hill several times and Andrew Carnegie in this last segment here. And I've read a lot about Andrew Carnegie. I love understanding his life, both his successes and his failures, his mistakes. And one of the things I did not know, because it's not the thing that you're taught in school, you're taught, okay, he was the captain of steel and all of that, but he actually was in the railroad industry first. And one of his big breaks, if you will, one of the biggest challenges he had that led him into the steel industry, I don't know if you know this, was building the Eads Bridge at St. Louis across the Mississippi. And I was unaware of that until I started doing some deeper research and reading in different biographies. And he was the one that realized it's got to be built high enough. He was not an architect. He had an architect with him. Got to be built high enough so the riverboats, with the big steam or smokestacks could get underneath it, and it's got to be able to be a mile long. So they couldn't use iron, they couldn't use any of the building materials of the day. And at that point, steel per ounce was more expensive than gold.
Wow.
Yeah. And so when he brought the Bessemer process from England across, he built the largest mill in the world at that point in time. It was just massive. And he was getting the steel. And as a result of that, the price of steel dropped, I think, 95% in about 15 years.
Wow.
And so you talk about a vision. How do I get across this bridge across the river, the Mississippi River? And then from there, that leads him into this massive industry of steel, which changed the world. I mean, because now we've got skyscrapers because we have steel that he helped build that industry. So it's fascinating when you start to think about how one person can have that type of impact because of their vision and their willingness to persevere through anything, because he almost went bankrupt multiple times in that process. So he definitely, when he talked to Napoleon Hill, he really did know what it meant to hold that vision in mind and that one vision.
Absolutely. And actually, Edison did go bankrupt about 11 times. And he was the most prolific inventor. And among the things he invented was the telephone. He just didn't get to the patent office ahead of Alexander Graham Bell, or Elisha Gray was right in there too. So it's interesting how all that came together. And, you know, we're in an era now where we want to pick at people and criticize people and point fingers and condemn people for something they may have said or done. I encourage people to think of anybody who's innocent. Try to find anybody that's innocent of everything. So we learn from these great leaders. They were not perfect people, but they had lasting impact. You think of all the colleges and libraries and institutions and scholarship funds, et cetera, that have the word Carnegie connected to it. He felt like if he died with his money, he was a failure. And so he wanted to give it away in ways that didn't hurt people.
Yeah, he's got a fascinating life. It's really interesting to understand what he believed and how he led organizations. A lot of really good things that we can learn from that. So let's turn back to some of these things. We're talking about leadership principles. Can you share your leadership principles with us?
After I wrote that book, I also wrote a workbook to go with it, Moving Spirits, Building Lives. And in that, I define, and it's right here, this in the 4 sections. And I define, if you can master these 4 principles, you can master anything. And so they're expressed in music terms, conductor terms. So the first principle is know the score. I said, we got the score, we step on a podium. Well, there's a whole lot of lines on the paper and it goes left to right really fast. You can't possibly figure it out on the fly. You have to be prepared. You have to know every note in that score. The rule of thumb is for every hour rehearsal, you prepare for 2 hours. And so you have to have your skill set together. You have to have your very clear vision. What are we going to do with this piece of music? Because that piece of paper doesn't make any sound. That strategic plan doesn't do anything. We have to transcend the piece of paper, integrate it into performance. So that's my unique place in coaching and empowerment, is to integrate the strategy, the written word, into, let's get something done. Let's see success from that. And so the first principle is be very clear on what you're doing. Know the score. It's called foundations. Have the foundation in place. Your skill, your plan. Number 2, I don't want to have really bad players to play good music and make a mess of it. So I hire the best. When you put people around you, put the best people. This was about relationships. It's about building and maintaining healthy relationships. So we've got a good plan. We've got the skill set. Now we put the people into the plan. They know what to do, and we know how to lead them. Next is, musical term is rehearse for success. Every ensemble in the world, the best ones in the world, rehearse for every performance. We don't rehearse in business. We just go to work. So we have to hone the skills, and we build a high-performing or low-performing culture by the way we do things, the way we lead meetings, the way we do evaluations, the way we do our writing and our work. So we shape the culture. And so I call this systems. And Tony, have you ever attended a boring, unproductive meeting?
Just a couple in my life. Just a couple, though.
Have you ever led a boring, unproductive meeting?
Never.
Me neither. We're lying. So say this: never ever another boring meeting, because that shapes the culture. We practice high performance. So the systems we set up. Remember, you got a good plan. It's worthy work. You got the skill to lead it. You got really good people. Then you tie their hands. You put them in a system where you got to approve everything. Or I see lots of great boards with great people that don't do anything. They show up and it's tightly held, and the leader doesn't have the influence or the knowledge of how to integrate the plan into activity. And people are frustrated. They don't show up to sit there. They show up to do something. So foundations, what are you doing? What's your skill? Relationships, the best people. Systems, let them do the work. Create a system that works on its own. What if you're not there? Well, it needs to work when you're not there. And the fourth principle makes all the rest of them work. In music, there are these things called rests. It's not absence of sound, it's a punctuation in the music. I was actually I was in Nashville. The Dave Matthews Band was playing outside of Nashville, and it was going all this loud stuff, and it was silent. And then they started back up. There was an amazing punctuation in the music, and nobody in the audience made a sound. They're pretty loud at rock concerts. So when it shut down, everybody shut down. It was the focus moment, and then it was a punctuation for going forward. So the fourth principle is balance. People brag about, oh, I work 15 hours a day. I work 7 days a week, haven't had a vacation. They brag about that, like they're proud of it. No, you're burning yourself out, and you're preventing yourself from growing as a leader, and you're not effective. You think you are, but ask other people around you. So we need to balance personal life and work life, balance ourselves, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. We need to be a balanced person. And then we got to manage multiple priorities. So we have to work through other people today to be able to be effective. So if you can master those four leadership principles: foundations, leadership, relationships, systems, and balance. Balance helps us do all the others. You can lead better anywhere.
I will admit I've been in one boring meeting in my life. It was boring up until I heard my name mentioned. And so this meeting, I'll share a little story because it was a turning point in my career and in my life. This meeting happened in January of 2007. I was sitting in the boardroom at Gaylord Hotels, Gaylord Entertainment headquarters, and my VP was just the weekly meeting. I had zoned out. I was looking out the window at the snow or something at that point. And all of a sudden I heard my name mentioned, and kind of, how the brain kind of does a rewind to what you didn't hear but did hear, kind of thing. And what he had said was, Tony is now going to be in charge of all customer experience and customer satisfaction and the surveys. And I just went completely cold at that moment, because I was like, I've never written a survey in my life. I've never taken a psychology course I wasn't required to take, like, organizational psychology. But that meeting was what led me into the customer experience work that I do today, because I built the program there and then took it on when I started my consulting company. So it's quite funny, because that was a boring meeting. It was one of those usual weekly meetings that I just ignored until that moment of my life. And that boring meeting changed my life.
Yeah, you got to pay attention. Yeah. So yes.
So, and I had no idea it was even coming. They hadn't prepped me for it or whatever else. They had let the rest of the marketing research team go, and basically just dropped this in my lap. And I already had a full load. So it was just like, okay, you're doing this now as well. I was like, okay. I got to say, I have to learn. So Google and I became good friends for the next few months there.
Love it. You just got to give up sleeping.
Pretty much. I mean, I was already at that point, but yeah. So those are really good tips. I love that. The know the score, hire the best, rehearse for success, and balance. It's a great few principles, but it means a lot. There's a lot packed in there. So, okay, one other question here. I may have a couple more that come to mind as we go through this last one here that I was thinking about. What is the biggest challenge that leaders are facing right now?
We're afraid to be criticized, that we're going to be criticized for doing something bold. And we're living in these really toxic times, and I'm hoping it's going to pass. So we need to be bold. And we need to have people surrounding us, and we need to have a team backing us up, and we need to co-create the project we're going to do, so we're not left hanging out there and people shoot at us. So I think leaders are afraid that they're going to be criticized for doing something differently. And in nonprofits, we're risk averse. If we spend money on marketing something and it doesn't work, we're highly criticized. When Disney launches a film and spends 200 million and it's a flop, that's the cost of doing business. And so we need to install really good business systems. Like, we need to pay people decent salaries. We need to spend some money marketing what we do so that people know what we do and why they should support us. And we need to get rid of this fictitious overhead thing. CenterVision spends 100% of its work. We spend 100% of the dollars. Well, all of that goes to serving clients. So either it's 100% overhead or it's zero. It's depending on how you flip the numbers. And so we give away a lot of stuff and help a lot of people, because that's why I founded this. And so finding your niche, getting the team around you, being very clear on your objectives, and then finding a peer-to-peer group, because it's really lonely leading a nonprofit. It's really lonely starting up a business. You need a support system to keep you focused and to keep you encouraged, because it's really easy to get discouraged.
What would you say are the similarities between, because you've been in both roles now, as a leader of an entrepreneurial organization, and as a leader of a nonprofit? What are some similarities and what are some differences? Because a lot of the audience here may have been in one or the other, but not necessarily both.
It's a lot harder leading a church or a nonprofit. It's a lot harder. And it's harder because, well, you have volunteers, you don't have the leverage for paycheck, and you have assumptions, and you have historical memory of bad practices. So we've inherited, we've learned bad leadership, and we've inherited bad systems. Even if we're starting a new one, we bring people on and say, oh, this is the way you're supposed to do it because it's a nonprofit. And the very word nonprofit is the enemy to us, because it fosters scarcity thinking. And it's a lie. And it's not a term IRS uses. We're a tax-exempt C corporation. We're not a for-profit company. We're a for-purpose enterprise. And so we need to treat it like a business. We need positive cash flow. You don't call it profit. You have to have capital infusion. You have to make capital. You have to have positive cash flow to be able to invest in your infrastructure, your marketing, your systems, in order to impact more people's lives. So it's the good stewardship of managing the money that's important. It's really the same in a business. We have to make profit. We have to invest profit into marketing and research, and we have to invest it in the infrastructure to stay current and to stay flexible in the market. And I know when I go into a business how they treat me, whether they're making money or not. If they're really focused on customer satisfaction and can cater to your needs and help you, they're making good money. And the reason they're making good money is because they serve you. And so let me go back to what I said earlier. We make money because we solve problems, or we bring value, or both. So we have to really, when we start any kind of organization, define what problem are we solving and how are we different from everybody else? What do we do better than everybody else, and what attracts people to us? So there's lots of parallels with the business leadership and nonprofit leadership, except in nonprofit, you get a whole lot of free labor called volunteers, and you get free money if you qualify for donors, if you qualify for grants. There's lots of ways you can get money. It comes with responsibility to report on what you did with it, but it doesn't come with a loan that you have to pay back. The return on their investment is a return on life, ROL. They want to see impact in human lives. So in a nonprofit, we have to be able to describe the results, the impact of what we do. That money has ears. Money listens for, that's the impact, the results we create. In a consumer business, the impact we have on people that buy the product, we have to tell them why they need it and how they're going to benefit from it, and they need to feel that benefit. Then we've built this loyalty into our product. So it's a lot harder working in a nonprofit because we have all the history. We have this gloom of the word nonprofit, and we have some assumptions in the culture that don't help us. So we need to be bold and answer objections like they're questions and give people information This is what we're doing. This is why we need the money. This is what the money is going to provide. It's going to change people's lives. And we need to define that with a lot of clarity. So there's a lot more rules in running a nonprofit. IRS wants to know where the money goes. There's just a lot of rules in how we make money, how we spend money. That's why you need a very effective board that makes decisions on the finances and the governance, because you don't own the nonprofit. Nobody owns it. So it's a self-sustaining organization. If you close it, the assets cannot be dispersed to individuals.
It's interesting to use those terms and to really think about that. I had never really given that thought about the difference between the term nonprofit and the baggage that comes with that, and the term tax exempt. It's very different because from the one perspective, the nonprofit, it kind of goes back to that one of the things I see in business is that you've got people who are typically very good at selling and people who are very good at service. Seldom do you see the mix of the two, and it comes down to something I see in nonprofits a lot is there's this sense that money or asking for money is like a necessary evil. They'll even use that term, right? And it's not. I mean, it's like money is just a form of energy, and it just flows like water, like air. It just flows where it is called to, where the vacuum exists, if you will. And so I find it interesting to really contemplate those two terms and what that means. I mean, because it shifts. I'm on the board of a nonprofit. I'm going to have to stop calling it a nonprofit now and say a tax-exempt organization, because that shifts how I think about it. So that's a really good perspective. So following up on that, with leaders today and the challenges they're facing, can they actually make things worse than better?
Oh, yeah.
I thought the answer was yes, but let's go there for a few minutes.
Oh, that's enough. They make things worse. We cause problems. We're unaware of the consequences of our actions. And so we can be anxious, we can criticize people, we can give confusing directions, and we can blame other people. Does this sound familiar? So we have a classic set of this going on in government right now, where the people that make the laws are.
Oh, I thought you were talking about marriage.
Yeah. My previous wife said, we get married, men get married so you have somebody to blame. So there's lots of cynical things, but we show up as a leader when we solve problems, and we can't criticize others to make ourselves look better. So I'm hoping we'll move through these very critical times of everybody criticizing other people and saying, I've got the idea, when they really don't have a plan. They just want to pontificate about it because they hate somebody else. And I think it's time that nonprofits and small businesses are called to step up, because there are a lot of things the government should not be doing. And they govern. They manage the finances of the company, of the country. There's a lot of things the government has to do, but there's a whole lot left over that needs to be done. And that's where, if we didn't have the nonprofits, we would be in a lot of trouble. We didn't have the churches. A lot of people would suffer, because churches do a lot of philanthropic things to feed people, house people, and help people in ways we don't even know about. And the big church I served in Atlanta had built 100 Habitat for Humanity houses when I got there, and they were on the second 100. And they were creating a whole county in Georgia that had no substandard housing. So that's where big can make more impact in people's lives by doing something useful. And people came together working on a project. And so we're called to do very unique things. We have to get our act together. We have to learn to collaborate. This thing of cooperative capitalism. Capitalism is the system we live under, and it brings people out of poverty if we step up and help people get over the mental hurdle, like the simple mental hurdle of nonprofit. Let's change our paradigm, and we change our results. Jim Rohn had said many times that if you took all the money in the world and you distributed it equally amongst every single citizen, then it would, in a few years, it would gravitate back to the people who learned how to attract it to begin with. It is a renewable resource, and not all of us have the skill to attract it. So we have people on our teams that have the money language, that have the relationship. So having a lot of diverse skills on your team is paramount, no matter what organization you're running.
I think that's a really good point. And I've been talking with my clients and with others and anyone who listen, honestly. So um, one of the things that I see right now is, in the past we saw how money flowed toward those who had the skills and knew how to handle it. I think today is we look at where we are, and there's a lot of predictions that can happen in that, but today the money still is going to flow. But I think there's something else that's flowing, and that is when people get out there and are doing something purposeful and meaningful. I think you get to see influence flow, and influence can be more powerful than money, in my opinion, because when influence is present, money will follow. Money will find influence. And so I throw that out there. Maybe you've got some commentary on that, but from my perspective, if you're in business or in a nonprofit right now in this crisis, get out there and do whatever you can to influence people, be in front of them, especially in this time where we're in somewhat, physical isolation and not in front of other people. There's so many different ways you can get in front of them. So get out there and influence people so that it does have an impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely. James Allen, another author, wrote a little book, As a Man Thinketh. He said, this is paraphrase, to neutralize the gender. We don't attract what we need, we attract what we are. And so back to the writing of your plan, back to articulating it, back to influencing. We do attract to us like-minded people. And Bob Proctor talks about the vibration, how there's this vibration that's the law of attraction. And so it's very intentional that we know where we're going, and we're very committed to that, and we share it with people. And then we bring together like-minded people and we work together. And so nonprofits do not know how to work with other nonprofits. Churches don't know how to combine efforts with others. So I think we're in a time we're going to have to figure out how to work together just to survive. And if you think of all these churches that are just open on Sunday, what happens the rest of the week? We could partner with people that need the building. There's lots more things that we could do. So we're coming into an era where we're going to be a lot more efficient, a lot more effective. First time I went to Europe, we have hotels here and the lights are on in the halls and everything. In Europe, you go into a hall and the lights are off, and as you walk down the hall, the lights come on. And when you go into a room, you got to put a card in the slot before the lights will come on. When you go out, you just take your door key out of there and the lights go out. And so these little things save a lot of power when you add up everybody using their lights all the time. And so and energy was more expensive earlier on there than it was here. We've been very wasteful. So it's a cleansing time, and it's a regrouping time, and it's a time of focusing on how we can do things better.
Absolutely. Well, we had a couple shout outs come in. No questions, but a couple shout outs. Amy Lau, I think you might know her from CEO Space. She says hello to both of us. And Catherine, trying to think, she was somewhere in here. She says great information, so she really appreciates that. And several people watched. A lot of people were throwing up little emoticons. So we'll have to go back and watch and see what they loved, but because they didn't comment on it, but they were throwing up the emoticons. So, well, Hugh, how can people get a hold of you? How can people reach out to you if maybe they're on a nonprofit and say, you know what, I need to learn more about what you're doing, or maybe they need some leadership coaching or want to bring you in to help them in their organization? How can they reach you?
Well, and you don't have to spend a lot of money to do that. I have this online community for people to learn. You grow your skills, learn how to learn. All these things I talked about, I have resources that people can do step-by-step learning. It's a private community, and you go to nonprofitcommunity.org, nonprofitcommunity.org. And it's the Center Vision community, and you can try it out for $1 for a whole month, and you get several $100s worth of free stuff just when you get inside. So it's systematic learning. It's the encouragement of peers. And it's a whole wealth of information, and it's way less than a cup of coffee a day. It's just a little over $1 a day when you actually end up buying the full membership. So it's a really great system of resources that we've created over the past 6 years. And so we're inviting people in, and for a limited time, we're letting people sample it. And there's weekly Q&A with you, and there's the camaraderie of people working together. So all the things we talked about, you can learn about, you can grow your skills, grow your board, grow your revenue in the community. So that's where you can find out about what I do. When you go to nonprofitcommunity.org, there's a contact page. You can contact me. You can even schedule an appointment to talk to me. So that's the best place to go. And And the 31 Days to Becoming a Better Leader is on that site. And when you do betterleader.me, it takes you to the specific page on there. But there's a leadership magazine. There's a podcast, which you're going to be on, people talking about their different facets of the skills a leader needs to know. And so there's just a ton of resources, and you can find something you need next inside that community, and we can talk.
Excellent. So great to have you here, Hugh. Thank you very much for my last minute request, because the people I was gonna have on tonight couldn't make it. So I was glad that you were available. We just talked last week, and Vinny said, "Why don't you call Hugh?" I was like, "Of course."
I won't mention I was your second choice, but that's
no. But it's funny because I was planning on having you after we talked. I was like, I gotta have you on, and then it didn't even occur to me. It was like I could have him on this week. I don't have to wait for another month or so to have him on.
Doing a show every week, you do have things that don't work out, and you have to have somebody you can call on. So you may get a call from me saying, "Hey,
I'm here. If I can do it, I'm here." So yeah, it's been great. Your name has come up in conversation several times with Vinny lately, so we'll have to follow up with you a little bit later and chat some more. So
Vinny's
excellent.
A great guy. Vinny's a great guy. So I'll shout back to him and the people on Facebook. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. And Catherine, I see your comment just came up here. Will this be viewable again? Yes. So it will be on my feed on Facebook here. I don't plan on taking it down. After probably over the weekend, I will be transferring it over. So you will also be able to see it where the rest of the archives are. And if you can go there now, if you want to see the archives, that is at www.transformthehx.com. transformthehx.com. You can see all the shows. I've got one or two more to load out there, but most of them are out there. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Hugh, for joining us and for some great information. People really loved it.
You're a great interviewer. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.